What are some of the core principles that your parents taught you growing up? I'm sure they told you if you want to retire well and you want to live a good life, you need to get an education, you need to learn to be diligent in your studies, and then be diligent in your work, and then save well along the way. Well, unfortunately, that's just not the case anymore. And I'm not saying that those core principles don't still apply to just about everything good that happens to us. But what I'm saying is you need to understand the path that you're on if you want to get to the place that you'd rather be in retirement, other than checking your wallet or checking your Fidelity or checking your Schwab every 10 minutes and driving your spouse crazy while you're doing so. So in today's example, I'm just going to take scenarios that I see play out with couples in their 50s and their 60s, and I'm going to help you if you're in your 30s, 40s, or of course earlier in your 50s, and avoid that. Because what I've seen in my line of work is some families retire with money, others retire with freedom. And I know that that sort of sounds like semantics, that sort of sounds like wordplay, but really it's true. And unfortunately, if you don't start planning early, you get to a point where there's really nothing you can do about it other than continually check your portfolio, make sure you're good for the year, and make sure that you don't run out of money. So today's example, we'll use two fictional couples. Both of them are going to make the same amount of money. Both of them are going to save the same amount, and they're both 45 years old. So I'm going to show you how they end up with $10 million difference, and I'll also show you how one family, the Iversons, the investing Iversons, are able to live much more free in retirement. They're able to do a lot more of their bucket list items compared to the frugal Fredericksons. And all these, of course, are fictional. I'm sure you got that by the ridiculous names, but like I said, all these scenarios very, very realistic to what I see. Okay, so I guess the first thing I need to do is walk you through a profile here of who I'm talking about. Like I say, I have the Fredericksons here. They are Frank and Fanny. They're married, and they're both about early to mid 40s. Both of them are currently working. We're going to say that Fanny is just working as a teacher, and Frank is working in something that pays him $200,000. And they're married, and they live in New York, okay? And this is going to be the same for both the Fredericksons and the Iversons, so I'll only show you it once, I promise. But this is their net worth breakdown. So as you'll see, their net worth is $830,000, but that's broken up entirely different. And for the point of today's video, it's just going to be a little bit more helpful to focus on investment assets. So when I break that down into detail here, you can see we're at about $500,000 saved at 45 years old. That's going to contribute to our retirement. Now, the only thing I'm doing is basically excluding our health savings plan, or excuse me, excluding our college savings plan, which is just a 529, which I'm sure a lot of you have. But for the most part, it's broken down in between a 401k and a 403b. And keep in mind that I have both Frank and Fanny and whoever the Iversons are maxing out their 401k and then contributing about half to their 403b. So a lot of times I'll see one spouse max out a 401k and the other one contribute about $6,000, give or take. So I'm trying to make it about as realistic as possible. Okay, so now let's open up the actual projections, and I'll walk you through what these two mean here in a second, if my Wi-Fi would ever load. But you're gonna see both scores are drastically different. Let's start with the one on the left here. What is the one that they have zero chance of actually getting to the end of their plan with? I have this being the stereotypical couple who makes a lot of money, as you can see, and they continually are going to progress that in their career, but they're still afraid to invest in something that they don't really understand, or they've heard from their neighbors that they didn't really do well in the stock market some years ago, so they'd rather just stick to CDs or money markets or do something that's a little more risk-free. And I'm going to show you the issue with being risk-free this early in your life and even in retirement here in a second. But how that plays out in practice for today's example is they have 4% returns expected both before and after retirement. Now, if you see 4% and you get excited, we might be talking about you here. So what I have for inflation is 3%. Now, that's important to understand because what I'm practically saying here is that the Fredericksons are essentially just keeping pace with inflation by their investments, right? If I make 4% on my money, but my money's worth 3% less every year, that gives me a buffer of about 1%. It's not very good, and we're talking about trying to get away from the cost of living to spend in our retirement. Okay, so the only other two relevant things I'll share, and this will show in the plans, is the 0% plan has them spending $100,000 in present day value, $100,000 in present day cash in the future. And this one has, I think, lower, I think closer to $65,000, but let's see how that plays out. Okay, so as you can see here, this is a scary chart. If they run out of money prior to passing away, we've failed as financial advisors. But let's take a look at what actually happened. So as you can see here, 4% is what we're expecting on an annual basis. Now I get it. No one is ever going to get the same return every single year for the rest of their lives, but that's what we have to assume for an annual rate of return. Like I said, they're maxing out a 401k and they're adding to their 403b, and that continues to go up until Frank retires. And then Fanny continues to contributing to her 403b because she's a little bit younger, so she works a little bit longer than Frank. So they both retire at 60 years old down here. During that time, they retire with about $2 million. So to put this maybe in summary for you, we have a couple at 45 and 42 that currently has $500,000 saved for retirement. They're earning 4% in CDs or money market or something that's less risky, and they're adding to their 403b and their 401k and everything that they have more and more each and every year. Now, once we get into retirement, as I mentioned, $100,000 of present day cash. And you can see the damage that inflation does to your money over time, because by the time 2043 rolls around and both of them are going to be retired, that's going to be nearly $200,000. Hence, you're seeing if you're trying to take $200,000 out of nearly $2 million for the next 30 years, you're going to run out at some point. That some point for these two would be 2058, where you can see we have our first shortfall at the age of 78 and 75. And yes, that is very depressing, and you can see why these conversations are not fun. So the last thing I'll point out before jumping over to the scenario that's a little more bright is this post-retirement income. I need to explain this to you really briefly. This is just Social Security. If they had a pension, this would show up here as well. But we're going to say that once Frank retires, he starts his Social Security at 62 years old, which represents the earliest. He has to take it. And then Fanny, once she retires, she's also going to take hers at 62. So this is going to be their Social Security paying them out for all of these years. Okay, so this one looks a little better, right? We nearly get to the end, and we just make it by the skin of our teeth here. This chart is taking Die with Zero, the very popular book, a little bit too literally. So, oh, thanks. Sorry, was that UPS guy? So everything's the exact same here, right? We're expecting the same return over time. We've got the same additions to our 401k and our 403b that we're adding, and at the same age, we have the same amount saved. But one thing I had to change, of course, was how much they're planning on taking. Now, I started with $65,000 that they're planning on living off of. That's going to be $127,000 by the time they both retire. Now, I know I'm just throwing way too many numbers at you here, but essentially just know that they had to take about a 40% cut in how much they wanted to live off of in retirement in order to get to the end of their plan safely. Now, imagine having that conversation with someone. It's as fun as it sounds, but let's see how this plays out over time. So, in the last time, like I said, right around here we got to zero, but here we're still at about $2.4 million to our name. So much better. And finally, we get to the very end of our plan here with $67,000 saved when Fanny passes away comfortably in her bed, God willing, at 94 years old. So that is the plan that we have here. As you can see, this is not something that you would be comfortable with. I don't know anyone that I've ever shown a projection to that says, wow, I die with $67,000 to my name. Sign me up for that. Okay, so I always say that projections, you've got to be careful because you can just skew a couple of numbers and make the plan look better or worse than it really is. But here's what I'm actually saying here with Fanny and Freddie Fredrickson. My goodness, that's a mouthful. Is imagine living this life in retirement in which you work 30, 35 years, and then you retire into constantly being worried about whatever happens in your life. If you have a health event, you're not able to help your grandkids the same way you probably would, same with your kids. You're probably not able to take the same trips that you planned on taking in retirement because you have to be worried about this. And I know that you would just say, hey, why in the world would someone just not change their investment strategy, right? Well, I'm telling you that because I see it every single day. But let's look at someone who would be willing to change their investment strategy, and that's the Iversons. Okay, so I've saved the more exciting one for a second, maybe end the video on a good note rather than a bad one. So we're going to say same exact age, same exact money made, and the same exact state, and they're both married. So that's something to know. Mark and Mary, that's their names, I forgot. But in addition to making the same money, right, we have the same amount at 45 years old to save for retirement, right? So about 285 in a 401k and then 85 in a 403b. But the Iversons are going to take a drastically different approach to retirement here. they're going to invest their money in the market full. And I'm not saying invest it in the latest tech stocks that they heard from their neighbor or from some magazine, but just simply trusting that the market is going to perform in the future like it has in the past. And I know that every disclosure has to say that past performance is not indicative of future results. But in this example, I'm going to show them getting about 9% per year on average. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to get 9% every year. It just means when you take that span of 15 years they have until retirement, remember, I have them both retiring at 60 years old, the same as the Fredericksons, we're averaging about 9%. You'll see here in a moment that after retirement, I have them being a little bit more conservative, or maybe just the market not doing as well. We'll get down to 7%. Here's a breakdown of their two plans. As you can see, the one on the left, 84%, meaning 840 times out of 1,000, they succeed. 78, so 780 times out of 1,000, they succeed. I'll walk you through the differences between the two here in a moment. But let me first again show you exactly what I just said, but I'll show you it kind of in the nuts and bolts here. So we're going with the 9% rate of return before retirement, 7% after, like I mentioned, same inflation, same retirement timeline. Only this time they're going to live off of 100,000 both times. And I'm going to show you some different goals that they're able to include here in a moment, but let's just see how this plays out. If you remember a moment ago, I believe it was around 72 years old that the Fredericksons ran out of money. So you can see this chart looks significantly better. They retire at the same age at 60 years old with a lot more. Okay, they're about $1.5 million more, and that's just from earning 9% over 15 years. So if you think about your life, if you think about what's happened in 15 years, that's really not that much amount of time. So you can see the importance of investing early and staying invested. But as you can see here, as we scroll down to the bottom, they pass away. Mary passes away second with $10 million to their name. And if you compare that even to the better plan of the Fredericksons, where they had 67,000, that's not only due to them just right here getting 9% and 7% returns. That's due to them not having to depend on their portfolio as early and as often as the Fredericksons did. Another thing that's kind of hidden in the details here is when they start Social Security, okay? Because if you remember with the other couple, they had to start it at 62 years old. And if you know about Social Security, you can start it at 62, but if you wait until 70, you're going to get a larger benefit at 70. You don't have to wait until either of those two ages. You can take it at 63 through 69, and you're just going to get more added to your monthly payment from Social Security depending on how long you wait. So ideally, most couples will fall into waiting until 67 years old, which is full retirement age, like Mary and Mark are going to do, which you can see right here, or most wait until 70. Again, that's purely based on health and circumstance, so be careful with taking advice off the internet. But by waiting until the age of 67, and then when they both take it, they almost doubled their Social Security. So one of the powerful pieces of waiting for this is they have a significant portion of their living expenses. Remember, $100,000 present day is $195,000 at the start of their retirement, but they have a much more significant portion of this living expense covered by Social Security. Because of that, there's less stress on their portfolio to cover the rest of their living expenses, right? If you can think about a metaphor, it's almost like Social Security provides a much shorter bridge for them in this scenario, where with the Fredericksons, there was a much longer bridge, right? The portfolio had to do a lot more work to get them to their number, even when we lowered their living expenses in the second example. So a lot of you might be thinking right now, well, that's cool. Thanks for showing me if I invest more, I can live a better life. Thanks. What a takeaway. But what I want to show you here is something that I almost certainly see at least a couple times a month, is that we'll show couples projections in retirement. They see this number here, $10 million. The wife feels way better about her life. They can go get dinner on the way home, and they can feel a lot better about their circumstances. But there's something that comes sometimes a couple days after, sometimes takes a couple weeks. They call us back up, and they say, hey, actually, we think we want to change what we're spending currently, or we think we want to add such and such goal, or we want to do this because we know that we're comfortable where we're at, and we really don't want to die with $10 million. We don't really have many plans for it in the grave after that, so let's see what we can do. So what I did is added this second plan where you can still see a very high confidence score of 78%, and I added a couple goals for them. So again, chart looks fine, but the three things that I added were contributions to their grandchildren's 529 plan, travel for the first 10 years of retirement, and a $100,000 down payment for their daughter's house. And you can see all of this played out here in these 3 columns. So the $15,000 a year for travel, that's in addition to their current living expenses, $50,000 to put towards their their grandchildren's 529 plans, and then $100,000 in cash money paid to their daughter to help with the down payment for her house. Because my goodness, is the difficulty in getting a house in your 30s more difficult than it's ever been. So, okay, we finished the last scenario, the last projection with $10 million. You can see we're still almost to $8 million. So this is where we get into the fun stuff, saying how much can we make this number continue to go up, continue to do fun things, and be excited, and still be comfortable with whatever we pass away with. And we could do that all day, but I know I'm probably driving you crazy with all of the numbers and all of the charts that I'm throwing at you here. So if you want me to do one of these for you, or if you want to have a conversation, I'd be more than happy to. And I close with saying money isn't everything. Okay, I get it, but it does change your flexibility. It changes how you live in retirement. It changes how you can be generous. It changes how you can do just about everything. So being mindful of your circumstances today and making the changes that you need to make can put you significantly ahead in the future, as you've seen in today's example. So folks, get ahead today, mind your personal situation, have a conversation with a financial planner that you trust. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you next time.